You and I are going wine shopping together. You can find a sensational bottle of wine for criminally low prices. Let's get started exploring and tasting new wines together. To all of you who are celebrating in the United States, happy Independence Day. Today is a very special episode of BYOB because not only have I found you a new, deliciously affordable bottle of wine that we are going to learn all about, but this bottle in particular is almost exactly what the founding fathers of the United States would have been drinking when they broke away from Mother England and started a revolution. Today, we are going to learn about my very favorite and the very historic fortified wine, Madeira. Madeira is a Portuguese archipelago, or island group, roughly 300 miles off of the coast of Morocco. These islands, originally uninhabited, were discovered by Portuguese sailors in 1419 and named Madeira. These islands became a very popular port of call during the Age of Exploration and beyond for ships traveling to the New World and the East Indies. When Madeira was first being shipped from these islands, the wine was fortified with a neutral grape spirit to prevent spoilage, similar to port, another fortified Portuguese wine. However, the excessive heat in the holds of the ship and the movement of Madeira's journey completely transformed the flavor profile of the wine, for the better. The winemakers would discover this when unsold barrels of wine returned home after their long journey. And that unique flavor profile made it a hit, especially in the 13 North American colonies that would eventually become the United States. Here, no wine quality grapes were being grown at the time, though Thomas Jefferson did try. As Madeira became increasingly popular, winemakers found that aging these wines on long sea voyages was far too costly, and so they began to experiment with methods on the island to produce the same age and heated style. Today, winemakers replicate that journey using the estufa method for younger blends, in which the wine is kept in heated tanks. The canteiro method is employed for the older blends, colitas and frasqueiras. This method places seasoned oak barrels in the warm, humid attic of the winery, where the wine is gently heated by the warmth of the sun. The barrels are never 100% full, which allows the wine to slowly oxidize. This natural heating over time leads to progressive concentration of the wine, which means it just gets more delicious. Madeira is so richly diverse, and it's made in a wide variety of expressions, from very dry aperitif-style wine to sweeter wines that pair beautifully with dessert. Most Madeira is made with one red grape, Tinta Negra Mole. The most major styles, though, are made with 4 noble white grapes: the dry Cercial, the off-dry Verdelho, the sweet Boal, and the even sweeter, more luscious Malvasia or Malmsey. Madeiras that are destined to be sweeter wines are fermented on their skins, and then fermentation is halted early with brandy. That's why you have that residual sugar there. Madeiras that are meant to be drier are taken off of their skins prior to fermentation and allowed to ferment fully. The range is truly dazzling, with some Madeira being made in a solera, similar to Spanish sherry. Then there's the rainwater style, which is a very young, fresh style of Madeira that's made in the estufa method in those heated tanks. And then there are vintage Madeiras, all coming from 1 year, and some of these Madeiras go back hundreds of years, some even as far back as during the lifetime of the United States' founding fathers, and they're still drinking pretty dang well. Because Madeira has already gone through that heating and oxidation, things that would typically kill a wine, it's almost nearly indestructible. This bottle, Sandman's Fine Rich Madeira, I found at Total Wine & More for $19.99, which is pretty great for an entry-level Madeira like this. And Sandman's is one of the OGs of Madeira production, as well as port and sherry production. These guys go back to 1790, so pretty legit. This wine is made using that estufas method in the heated tanks, which is part of the reason that it's so cost-effective. And of course, it is made with that lovely red grape that you typically see in a lot of these younger, easier drinking Madeiras, the Tinta Negra Mole grape. And you only really need to pour yourself 2 ounces, half of a typical glass, if you will. So even though I typically pour myself just a taster glass in these BYOBs, I have now poured myself a pretty full glass of Madeira, which, oh no, darn. But because this really does pack such a punch, these flavors and aromas are so intense, and also it's a fortified wine, which means it's gonna be higher alcohol percentage, and this is 19% alcohol by volume. So you don't need much of it in your glass. And one of the wonderful things about Madeira being so hardy and having this longevity is that once you open it up, you don't have to worry about this guy going bad in a few days like a typical normal unfortified wine, or going bad in a few months like a different fortified wine. Again, because it's gone through that heating and that oxidation process already, this can be open and be good and fresh for years. Some people argue that, it's still not gonna be its finest in decades, which I would agree with, but you don't have to worry about it like you would with other wines. But this has such a lovely, this is a very typical color of a Madeira, this lovely amber brown hue. Because it's made with a red grape, you do have some lovely red glints in this as well. I can already see, if you look at the side of your glass, the legs or tiers are these fat, heavy tiers, so you can see the alcohol content there. That's what these are. They're a sign of viscosity, alcohol content in your wine. So even if I didn't know this was Madeira, I'd assume this was a high alcohol wine. You can smell the alcohol on this as well, but gosh, there's just so many lovely aromas in this glass just jumping out. Lots of dried fruits. I get dried cherry, dried red plum, dried apricot. Lots of beautiful nuts in here as well. Toasted nuts, walnuts, almonds. Getting dried mandarin peel, dried mandarin peel. A lot of orange notes as well, like a candied orange. And all these lovely mushroom notes as well, which are signs of the oxidation in this, which is something you wouldn't typically want on, again, an unfortified normal wine, that are lovely on here. Very forest flory and dried porcini mushrooms. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove as well, these lovely warm baking spices. And then these dessert notes as well. You're getting butterscotch, caramel, it's almost brulee. It's almost like that nice hard burned top layer, that sugar on a creme brulee. More dried fruits, dried dates, figs. There's just so much to find and unpack in a Madeira and in a lot of fortified wines, which is a shame. They're not very popular anymore. They kind of get a bad rap. They've fallen out of favor. And there's a lot of terrible versions on the market that aren't even really true Madeiras, true sherries, true ports that come from this place and are made the proper way. And it's just such a shame to me. It breaks my heart. I've always had such a soft spot for fortified and dessert wines, and I want more people to know about them and love them. Something to note about Madeira, it's high acid, which, if you know me at all from these, you know I love high acid. High acid makes me want to take another sip of wine. It makes me want to take another bite of food. It fills my mouth with saliva. Madeira is high acid. Even with the sugar on this, high acid. When you start getting into the drier styles of sherry, the Cercials, oh my goodness, but they're so lovely. They're so well balanced out, but very, very high acid. And this fine, rich Madeira does have sweetness to it because the acidity is there to balance it out. It's not coming off cloying. It's still coming off incredibly fresh and lifted, but it just has this really lovely, unctuous, sexy kind of body on it. Yes, I'm talking about the wine. Absolutely high alcohol, feeling very toasty right now. And all those lovely notes confirming on the palate. The dried dates, figs, dried apricots, the nuts, walnuts, almonds especially now, and hazelnuts on the palate. The orange peel, those warm baking spice notes. This is just something lovely that you'd want to curl up with on a cold winter night if you live in an area like that. And it has this wonderful finish. So a sign of a good complex wine, one of the signs, is that you have all these layers of complexity in the glass, but you also have this wonderful lingering finish that it keeps going and keeps evolving. It doesn't just kind of poop out and fall flat. And I'm getting a lot of those mushroom notes on the finish that are just glorious. And so this wine, because it has the sweetness on it, you're gonna be drawn to pairing this with desserts, especially like a creme brulee, absolutely. I think a chocolate hazelnut cake would be fantastic as well. Anything with caramel, butterscotch pot de creme, which is like my go-to dessert with caramel and sea salt, always. I don't care how full I am, if I see a butterscotch pot de creme for dessert, I'm ordering it. And I would drink this with that. Just because this is sweet doesn't mean you should necessarily stray away from savory dishes though. I think this Madeira would be killer with a cheese and charcuterie plate, you know, with the nuts, with the dried fruits, with some more powerfully flavored cheeses. Madeira on its own, I think it's wonderful after a particularly hearty meal to pour yourself a glass of this to help you digest. Anytime I go back to Illinois to visit my parents, my father and I will pull out the bottle of Madeira that I sent him for his birthday or Christmas or whatever, and we'll pour ourselves a couple glasses, usually more than a couple glasses, and we'll just sit on the deck and share stories about family, share memories. And It has a really special place in my heart for that reason. I hope that you can become just as addicted to this as I have. But if you want to try a true piece of history, look no further than Madira. This bottle is an absolutely wonderful start. If you fall in love and you want to kick it up a notch and take it up another level, I cannot recommend enough the Rare Wine Company's historic series, Madiras. They're named after different cities in the original 13 colonies. So my personal favorite is Charleston Social, which is the very dry one, and it just takes it all to another level. Much more complex, much more depth, much more of that lingering finish, much more powerful and just stunning. But this is a really beautiful introduction at a beautiful price point. Those other bottles are gonna run you $50 to $65. This is $20. So beautiful introduction to that. I hope you fall in love with this wine as much as I do and share the love. Drop a comment, let me know what you think about Madira. And until we share our next bottle together, I hope if you're celebrating that you have a really fun, relaxing, safe Independence Day. And cheers to exploring and trying new wines.